are a lot of Israelis who feel even more isolated than they did, 2 years ago. And I'm not going to blame the West for, for not getting it, because I don't think anything that's happened lately is really a surprise. Like, I've seen this stuff building for a long time. So there's nothing here. Like, I tell people all the time, I tell people there's nothing new here. What's new is that a lot of us are now paying attention to, to the kind of anti-Zionism that is also anti-Semitism. Again, not all of it is. I know everyone's going to tell me, well, there's legitimate criticism of Israel. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the same anti-Semitic tropes that have been around for 2,000 years that have now been appropriated and being used as anti-Zionism, and is, of course, really anti-Semitism. And you all know it. You've all seen it. We've all seen it numerous times. We see it every day now. What?
Is there
You
starvation in
weren't here
Gaza?
when Gail. So Gail started this by asking about
No.
the parade yesterday, where Israelis were, videotaped screaming "death to Arabs," and of course, and it's I know it's not cool, but as I said, you missed what I had said. With there's a growing number of Israelis who don't care anymore. We are now, yeah. Okay. Well, we're also now being streamed, but yeah, to answer Gail's question, yeah, there are definitely Israelis now who don't care about the optics anymore. They're beyond that. So, and again, I'm not going to blame the West or people in the West for the anti-Israel stuff. But my brother was just in. He's in Spain. He was in. I think he might still be in Spain this week, and he says there's anti-Israel graffiti everywhere. So, in Spain, yeah, yeah.
Wow.
No, you won't see it in Germany. Germany will clean it up and nips it in the bud right away. No, Germany's very sensitive to it.
Do you feel that there is starvation in Gaza?
And what?
Is there starvation in
Is there
Gaza?
starvation in Gaza? Yes, of course there is. I mean, I don't, obviously look, you have I'm just going to answer Gail's question. The thing that is, that is interesting is that, like, people are now starting to ask questions because, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, beginning of May, whenever, like, a 3 or 4 weeks after the ceasefire ended, people started saying there's going to be 2 million people that'll die in 2 weeks if we don't get this food in, right? Well, it's now a month later, and it hasn't happened. They've been saying for weeks that everyone's going to die in a week, in another 2 days, in another whatever. And at a certain point, people are I don't know how bad it is. Obviously, I'm not there, and the people I talk to in Israel are also not the people in charge. They're mostly people who are, in some cases, a little bit more connected than the average Israeli citizen, but they're not. I'm not talking to Netanyahu's office, okay? And I will tell you that people in America, Jews and Gentiles, are starting to say, you're lying to us. You're telling us everyone's dying, and clearly not everyone's dying. So, look, that's, again, I don't know the answer, but I do know that people stop believing you when you tell people constantly that everyone's dying and they're not. So everybody wants this war to end. If you're a normal, sane person, you want this war to be over. But again, there are consequences to saying that everyone's dying of starvation, and they're not. So you figure it out. I can't figure it out. I don't think you can figure it out, by the way. That's why I said it rhetorically. But
Right. At this point, I don't trust any resources.
yeah, but Gail,
I'm
it's
wondering-
backfiring. It's backfiring on the Palestinians. It's backfiring on those people that are trying to elicit sympathy for them. Because if you're telling us that they're dying, if you're telling us that there's genocide, but as everyone's pointed out, this genocide that's been going on for 40 years has seen a net increase of the population rising tenfold, you don't believe it when you think about it. I mean, if you have a normal operating brain, you just go, yeah, genocide doesn't see a population increase tenfold in 60 years. So it just doesn't. Again, there are consequences for saying stupid things. I mean, there should be.
Yeah.
So again, for the people who are trying to elicit sympathy, some people have a way of obviously not thinking about things, but if you do think about things, and it pisses people off. Look,
I'm
I will
just
tell
hearing a
you, Gail,
barrage of
I'm talking to
anti-Israel.
women,
Yes.
reform, liberal Jewish women. I'm not going to name names because I don't need to, and I don't think they'd care anyways. But I'm talking about women who are Democrats, who are liberals, who reform, who are every single liberal thing you could say, who are saying now, why are we talking about getting food to people who are trying to kill us? Okay.
Me and Sarah, okay? It's very liberal. Yes,
So
absolutely. I'll
that's
name
what
this.
people are starting to say. I'm just
Right.
telling you, that's real. So you figure it out, you answer it because I can't. I
Yeah.
can't. I don't have an answer on this one, folks. I'm just watching this and I'm saying, I hope it ends soon, and I hope we can get back to not worrying about every day something horrible happening. And as I told people, and they've
I
asked
just
me
hear a
about the shooting,
barrage of
asking me about the
anti-Israel.
shooting last week, I said,
Yeah.
"What are you talking about? You've been building up for this. This is what you expect. You had to expect this to happen because you've been whipping people up into a frenzy for 2 years. So the fact that innocent people that were actually peace loving and advocates for coexistence got gunned down in a hotel in DC, you've been asking for this. You created this, and you're responsible for their murder. So." Anyways, and I'm talking about by you, I mean the media and people who have created this anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist climate. So congratulations, those deaths are on your hands. And then we walk away going, well, we want everyone to live, which is what Elon Omar said, and what other what CARE said, the Islamic Council for Arab Islamic Relations, when they said we don't advocate murder. Well, you know what? When you tell people that there's genocide, that Israelis are genocidal maniacs, someone's gonna do something. So, anyways, everybody knows. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Anyways, we're going to finish Ecclesiastes today, and we're going to read the last couple of chapters. We read only chapter 7 and 8 last week if you weren't here, so you did not miss many of the chapters. And of course, it's up on YouTube if you want to hear the discussion, the reading of it. Those two chapters, 7 and 8 of Ecclesiastes, were kind of in this last half of the book. the the book is really getting, I wouldn't say dark, but it's basically getting very skeptical. And the last couple of chapters were essentially, look, we can't figure this stuff out. We can't figure out how the world works. We don't understand the process or how these kinds of things happen. That's going to continue today, but they're going to add something else to it, which is, and we don't know what happens after we die, which of course is what we're all thinking about. And if Solomon wrote this book, and again, it's ascribed to Solomon or somebody like Solomon who's getting into the last part of their lives, and they're thinking about this stuff like many of us do, or in the later part of their lives, say, yeah, we're thinking about this. And these answers are answers that probably some of you have thought of. And the fact that somebody, over 2,000 years ago said this is kind of amazing. It also is amazing that it's in the Bible. Again, we're going to read the last couple of lines of this amazing book and then scratch our heads and say, oh, how did that happen? But we'll get to we'll discuss that, but I definitely want to get to the last couple of lines because we got to spend some time on that. But we're going to start here in chapter 9, and these next couple of chapters are kind of a continuation in a way of the previous two, but it also now goes into okay, but what happens when this existence is over? And I want to make it clear. There is not a sense, and some people you'll hear say that Ecclesiastes is kind of a skeptical book or a non-theist, not a, kind of a rejection of of traditional Jewish theology. That's not the case, and there definitely is an understanding that there is something after we die. But again, it's not necessarily something that we should be real excited about, and that's what, of course, bugs people about this book. It's a book where, again, you watch it, a movie or watch a TV show, and it's great because it doesn't have necessarily a happy ending. It has a true ending. It has an ending where you go, yeah, it's kind of life. Oh, I haven't seen it yet. My wife watched it. She said I'll like it. But yeah, people are amazed that the Bible doesn't have happily ever after endings. It doesn't. I've told you that many times. All these stories, but that's life, my friends, and in a way, that's why this book is so powerful. All right, so Rosemary, if you'd start, we're at the beginning of chapter 9. So the last couple of chapters were again kind of like this reflection, this like posing this question, like what is this about? And this is the kind of the next part of this, the next phase.
For all this I noted and I ascertained all this, that the actions of even the righteous and the wise are determined by God. Even love, even hate, humankind knows none of these in advance, none. For the same fate is in store for all, for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good and pure and for the impure, for one who sacrifices and for one who does not, for one who is pleasing and for one who is displeasing, and for one who swears and for one who shuns oaths.
Yeah, and again, this kind of sounds like, you know, there's a time for war, a time for peace, a time for this, a time for that, right? It sounds like that, right? The person who does this, the person who does that, the person who, yeah. And again, the same fate means we all die. It doesn't it doesn't mean that we're all the same. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean I think so. Well, until the very beginning and the very end, but yes. I definitely do. And again, this is the example of it sounds like chapter 3, right? And you'll see some other stuff. And again, this phrase that we have, Tachat Hashemesh or Tachat Hashemayim, there's nothing new under the sun. Or again, that phrase of we're under the sun or under the sky.
That is the sad thing about all that goes on under the sun, that the same fate is in store for all. Not only that, but people's hearts are full of sadness and their minds of madness while they live, and then to the dead. For one who is reckoned among the living has something to look forward to. Even a live dog is better than a dead lion, since the living know they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no more recompense, for even the memory of them has died.
Yeah, that's a pretty dark idea.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sad thing. There's the dead. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is it doesn't say that there isn't a life after death, but the understanding here is that this world is better than the next world. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm kind of summarizing, kind of what he said, which is that once you're gone, the next place it doesn't really matter. Now, what's interesting about that is that while it's kind of a sad thing to think about, there's also an interesting idea here. And this is one of the reasons why Judaism like why when people say, well, what do Jews believe about the afterlife? Or I heard Jews don't believe in heaven or hell. Well, look, it doesn't say that there's not an afterlife. As a matter of fact, there's going to be some lines coming up specifically about this where it seems like, yeah, there's some existence. Well, look, yeah, yes. So it says show. I mean, we're going to get to that. But what's interesting is that there is a feeling in Ecclesiastes that for whatever the next existence is, it's not this existence. And we're not necessarily looking to get out of this existence, which is why it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. Yeah. No one wants to be everyone would want to be a lion, but a live dog is better than a dead lion. So there's an interesting idea here, which is that at least from the terms of this world. Now, you can make the argument, yes, that's from the perspective of being in this world. So for someone who lives in this world, being in the next world is never a good thing. But do you
Dogs
understand
are
what I'm
going
saying?
to die too.
It's not that the next world is bad or the next world is dark or the next, but it doesn't matter in the next world. Everything that you care about is over once you leave this world. The what? Mhm. Yeah, but wait, but they assume that there is. I mean, you've already seen it's been in this book. Forget the other books of the Bible that where it says that there's a Sheol. By the way, in none of the other books of the Bible does it say, "Hey, let's all try to get there." Everything that you think about of heaven being a beautiful, glorious place is from later parts of Judaism and then, of course, Christianity and all the movies and all the TV shows and all the things that you've been indoctrinated in to believe in heaven and hell. That's all later. But in the Bible itself, it's pretty much, I don't know if it's better. But look, and again, the Jews this was written 2,000 years after the Egyptians buried their pharaoh. 2,000 years after the pharaohs were burying the Egyptians were burying pharaohs with ships and gold and slaves and everything else. They believed that, like, it's not like people didn't believe that there was an afterlife. And not only that, you're going to tell the Egyptians that they're, the highest, most advanced civilization, that their belief in an afterlife doesn't make any sense? No, people believed in an afterlife. But the Bible is saying, no, there's no guarantee that the afterlife, at least from the standpoint of what you and I value, has any value in the next world. And that could be a good thing, by the way, of course, because there's a lot of stuff in this world that we care about that we shouldn't care about. But this idea that the people that we love, that we can connect with them in the same way once they leave, they're kind of saying even the memory of them's gone. Of course. Of what? Oh, of course. Yeah, Reverend Lynn, you just walked in just as we read this line. The dead know nothing. They have no more recompense. They don't have ain ode. Ain ode. They got nothing more. They don't even have the memory of them is also forgot. I mean, the literal translation. Mary, what does the King James say? What's going to give a more literal translation? Yeah. I don't like the memory of them has died. I definitely wait. It's definitely powerful and it's a, like, whoa, the memory's dead. But it's the memory has been forgotten. Okay. Anyways, yeah, let's go back. Yep. I know. Yeah, I know. So that's what they say. That you die twice, right? When you actually die and when the last person who knew you dies. When you die twice. So so what do we try to do? We try to create legacy, right? We try to figure out ways for us to be remembered all around the walls of this building, right? People put up their names. Now, of course, you know, it's a little thing, but it is something. People go by, they see the name, and there's a look. I told you I walked through the cemetery at Deadwood 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, whatever that was. Yeah, I walked through the cemetery. I looked at the names. I looked at the dates. I don't know these people. I didn't know one of those people. No, he's not buried there. He's buried in St. Louis. But you look at the people's names and you see them and you're like, for a minute, you're like, I'm trying to imagine what their life was like. The person died in 1910 or whatever. Like, oh man, they lived through that. They didn't see World War One, but they, so I don't know. I don't know who those people are, and I can't even bring them into my mind. You're right, but if there was a guy who was pictured, I saw Saul Starr's picture there. If I had seen, him, I might have like imagined the TV show and I see this guy and I'm like, oh yeah, he looked like that guy. But yeah, there's people who our memories will be gone. Now, good thing is there's so much damn videotape of you and so much photographs of it. People we're going to see. They're going to see that guy. They're going to see that woman. They're going to go, oh yeah, it was my great grandmother, or that was my great grandmother's sister, or whatever. And they're going to know you. They're going to know you. Somebody will see you. So the good thing is that we have ways of creating legacy now that are not ways that our ancestors could. So yeah, you're right. Like I wish I have, I have some pictures floating around of, of my great great grandparents, somebody got this picture, whatever. But there's not, I don't have like, I have like one picture because there probably was one picture of them, right? There was the one picture that guy sat for in 1890, That's the one picture. I'm lucky I have that. But, you know, those, when you think about people knowing you and again, we name after people, right? In Ashkenazi tradition, we name somebody after someone who passed and we keep that name alive. So even though the person who you're named after doesn't know you, we teach you about that person, right? So that's the way we keep those names alive, and in a little way keep that. Now again, it only works for one generation because we don't usually go, well, you were named Rachel after so and so, and that person, Rachel, was named after that person. Now, if you did that, then you keep a lot of people's names alive, but generally works for one generation. You're named after your great great grandmother, and this is what we know about her. She was born in Russia and whatever, and that's all. But we don't know who she was named after usually. So yeah, it's from the standpoint of us, what we know in this world. And as you said, we don't know about the next world, can't be proven, don't know. And what people do in this world that they value, they will not care about in the next world to some extent. I mean, that's maybe my interpretation of it, but yeah, so let's go back.
We ready?
Wait. Yeah. Yeah.
The option of not being born, right? Being brought into this world. It doesn't even mention that, which is kind of sad.
Because this is a guy this is a guy who's reached a state of his life where he's thinking about death, and that's what the fate is, right? The fate isn't it's gone, it's gonna but it's gonna end. So again, so you learn from it, right? So you take away from that because of that, because this is the same fate that exists for us, we got to learn something that, right? But again, so he says what the tragedy is that it doesn't matter what you do, how good you were, whatever happened with your life, you're still going to die. And that's the same as the guy who's in the electric chair that just got fried. He's dead. You're dead. You're all going to die. That's what he says. And but he says even more, John, is that we go through life full of sadness, full of craziness, and that's when we're alive, and then we die. So this existence is, he says, is inherently tragic. And again, I told you the rabbi said the same thing. The life is inherently tragic, but we're here, and there's got to be a purpose to it. And of course, this isn't where he ends, but he concedes it. He basically says, I know. Don't tell me that we don't have a tragedy, that it's inherent to our lives, that we're going to get sick, you're going to die, and it doesn't matter how good you are. That's what's going to happen. But of course, we don't, let's turn that into something life affirming, and let's turn this into something that we're going to make the most out of each day. So yeah, it is. I mean, this chapter starts off being dark. Now, let's, we just finished with the memory of them has died, but what else is gone?
Their loves, their hates, their jealousies have long since perished, and they have no more share till the end of time in all that goes on under the sun.
Yeah, wait, and so that's a really important line, because the people who are dead, their concerns are over. That's done, and they no longer take part in this world in that way, and that's sad. That, by the way, should inspire us to again make the most out of every day, because once we're gone, we don't take part in this existence anymore. Whatever the next existence. Now, again, this is where people go, well, I don't care because the next existence is better. But all he's saying is, okay, this existence is what it is. This existence is what it is. And when you're gone, you don't take part in it anymore. And anyone else who argues about that, you know, what do you want to tell me? Prove it to me. Prove it to me that, you know, that there is a way for somebody who's been gone to have fun in this world. Because that's what he's going to say right now.
Go, my son, eat your bread in gladness and drink your wine in joy, for your action was long ago approved by God. Let your clothes always be freshly washed, and your head never lack ointment. Enjoy happiness with a woman you love all the fleeting days of life that have been granted to you under the sun, all your fleeting days. For that alone is what you can get out of life and out of the means you acquire under the sun.
And there's that phrase again, Tachara Shemesh, which is used a couple of times there. And there's the enjoy your life with your partner, right? Have a partner in life. And this, of course, it says wife because it's directed towards a man, but, you know, again, towards the partner. And by the way, it doesn't just say with your husband or wife, your partner, that you love. It says Asher Ahavta. It says Asher Ahavta, that you love. It's not, well, just you enjoy it because they're your partner, but because you love them. So you should be with somebody you love. It does say that, which is nice. I mean, it's nice to recognize that there should actually be, you know, not just you're married to them. That's why you spend your time with them. But you should be happy. You should live life. And the recognition that it is kol yemei chaye, your life is hevel. They translated that as fleeting, right? That's that word hevel. Right there, right? Hevel. Does the King James translate hevel as fleeting? Yeah, because the King James cannot let go of the word vanity. they've been translating hevel as vanity from the very beginning, and there it is again. Now, the translation we have here is fleeting is a good word. It's a good, very good. It's totally acceptable. But I want to point out to you, it's the same word we keep hearing. It's nothing. It's nothing. All the days of your life, they go by like nothing. It's gone. It's like air. I thought you were going to say with Mary, but John, he likes to, yeah, the banter. That's there's our banter. But the understanding is fleeting. But the word kol yemei havel. This is kol yemei chaye havel. Hevlecha, your vanity, your air. Again, this recognition that life is fleeting, that life is gone. Ephemeral is like air. Ethereal too, like ethereal. Yeah, and so we have that. We have that understanding that it is not long, and you better enjoy it with the people that you love, and you better enjoy it with good food and drink. Enjoy. Again, doesn't say, you know, drink to the point of your, you know, falling over and, you know, waking up with a hangover. It definitely doesn't say to drink and to enjoy life to the point where there's consequences for your health that are making your life shorter or even less enjoyable, but at a level that you're able to enjoy, that you're able to have fun, that you're finding ways of enjoyment. And again, this is why some people consider this book an Epicurean style philosophy, which again, Epicureanism, we talk about, you know, Epicurean delights are usually like you eat well or you drink well. But the true Greek kind of emphasis on Epicureanism wasn't, hey, let's go out and party all day. It's really not that. It's enjoying the simple pleasures in life, simple pleasures, and enjoying them because that's all we can do is enjoy basic, you know, enjoyments. It's kind of a weird idea that we're kind of getting back to, which is that it doesn't have to be complicated. So that's what he says. So in the midst of this kind of depressing reflection, but here's how you can enjoy life. And here you go.
Whatever it is in your power to do, do with all your might. For there is no action, no reasoning, no learning, no wisdom in Sheol where you are going.
Now there it is. So when people say, but is there life after death? Yes. There is no rejection of life after death. It's just that none of those things are happening in the next world. Right?
Yes. Kind of against the idea
in
of
the
that
next
heavenly
world,
Talmud
in
school
Sheol,
where the
where
rabbis
you were
imagined
going.
they were going.
Well, say that, Rosemary, again.
Oh, I said it's kind of against that idea of the Talmud school where the rabbis imagined they were going in heaven.
Yeah, that they're going to continue to study and grow and learn and be with God. Yeah, it kind of goes against that. But yeah, it definitely goes against this idea that like the next world is where we study it. But again, if you understand it in a sad way, then it's, well, there's just nothing there. But there also is this understanding that you could say in the next world, that kind of stuff that we do doesn't have the same kind of effect as it has in this world. In the sense that, let's just say on a one level, that it's because we're unified, we're with God, that all the energy is no longer separated, that we're part of God. What's interesting is that it's because to some extent you're beyond that existence, that none of the stuff that we find enjoyment in, or none of the things that we value are of value anymore. Now, again, you can make the argument because you're beyond that now. You don't even need to worry about that. But for the time being, for this world, all we can say is you better make the most out of this world right now. Right? You better enjoy this world. And that's what he says. Get everything out of this world that you can. In a positive way, not like take advantage of everybody in order to get that stuff. Here you go.
I have further observed under the sun.
We're chapter 9. Chapter 9. And now this is one of the most famous lines. It's probably the second most famous, well, third most famous. Vanity of vanity is the second most. The most famous is there's a time for every purpose under heaven. And then vanity of vanity is always. Vanity is very famous. But this is the next, probably a third or fourth most, I'd probably say third most famous line. This is the line right here.
I have further observed under the sun that the race is not won by the swift, nor the battle by the valiant, nor is bread won by the wise, nor wealth by the intelligent, nor favor by the learned. For the time of mischance comes to all.
Yeah. And so the phrase, usually what's kind of like summarizes the race is not to the swift. The race is not to the swift is the way that it's usually, usually that translated, it's the way that this is like summarized, this very famous idea, which is that, yeah, the person who wins is not often the fastest person, right? They're the person who has a really lucky day that day, right? Or they've, the other people got hurt and that person won that day. Again, the idea that the timing, and again, this phrase that goes back to the chapter 3, to there's a time for every purpose under heaven. The time and purpose for these things, or the time and experience, doesn't always make sense, and it doesn't always line up that the person who you'd think would win that day is going to win. And that's why, again, as people who watch sports will say, that's why we play the game, because you just don't know what the matchup's going to be. And so people, baseball has become more and more about, sabermetrics and about, figuring out the percentages, and you see all this kind of crazy strategies that goes on, and it works. I mean, they say it's crazy, when you think about how much, is actually not, when you look at these matchups, that they're not that strange, but because people can figure them out. But of course, there's always stuff that happens. And that's why no matter what the percentage is, people enjoy watching. There's my phone. There's my phone's talking to me right now. That's crazy. My phone just decided that it wanted to answer that question. But yeah, for all the technology, for all the numbers, for all the ways we can figure this stuff out, it doesn't always happen that way, right? And so that's why he observes. We can't figure this stuff out. We can't figure it out. You don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect. You just don't know because stuff happens, right? And most importantly, again, this is what we have in this theme here.
And human beings cannot even know their time, as fishes are enmeshed in a fatal net, and birds are trapped in a snare, so humans are caught at the time of calamity when it comes upon them without warning.
Yeah. And so we don't know, for all the, times we're working out, trying to stay healthy, every, vitamin that we take, every pill that we take to try to keep ourselves healthy, you never know. Could be the day that you walk across the street and a bus hits you. That's what it's telling us. We don't know. It don't matter. So this recognition thousands of years ago that we don't know is something pretty amazing. And so there's this recognition that, like, we're walking around and there is that kind of like, there's a freedom that comes to that, to knowing that, yeah, I don't remember, there was this program, you could put in, I don't smoke. This is how much I drink. This is what I eat. And this is what your lifespan is going to be, right? Based on your parents' age and this stuff. And it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, I don't even remember the last time I did that because it doesn't make any sense. I don't even want to know anymore. So, yeah, there's this understanding that if you knew when it was going to end, I don't think so. I think if you knew that you were going to, you had 2 more weeks or you had 20 more years, maybe you'd live life not very well, right?
Lots of people find out they have 2 more weeks.
Yeah. And Rosemary, when that happens, it never happens where you go, well, the next 2 weeks, I'm going to, like you kind of like, well, I'm going to go to, I'm going to go nuts. I'm going to go buy this. I'm going to, have this to eat. I'm going to go to this, going to Paris to have this meal or whatever. Like, nobody ever does that.
Too late.
It's too late. So, you have to live that way kind of to some extent every day, within rationality, within reason, but you can't live thinking I'm going to have 30 more years. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, it's tough when you think about the fact that for all the information that we have, and again, we have amazing information at our fingertips, we really don't know. Obviously, it makes life exciting. It also teaches us we better enjoy it, right? Every day. So if this isn't a reminder of this, and he says, read this last line, this
thing too I observed under the sun about wisdom, and it affected me profoundly.
Now, is that the previous line?
Or is that the previous line or the next line?
Or is it the next line, right? Now, this is an interesting timing because what we're going to have right now is a parable. A parable. We're going to be reading parables tomorrow night at Talmud class. We're going to look at parables in the Talmud, some of these parables. Really important in the stories of Jesus because Jesus loves parables. He talks in parables. We don't know a lot about Jesus, right? We really don't. We don't know a lot about his life. But if we take the Gospels at their word, he liked parables. He liked teaching in parables. Again, there are people who say that he didn't do that. Their parables were collected by somebody else and inserted in there. But come on, I think it's safe to say that he did because it was a Jewish style. We're going to look at some of those parables that exist in the Talmud too. But we have parables in the Bible. There's a couple of famous parables. And this is an example. This isn't necessarily the best parable, by the way. I won't say this is the most insightful parable, but they're little stories, they're little fables, and it was very common in Jewish storytelling to use a mashal, called a mashal. Here's one.
There was a little city with few men in it, and to it came a great king who invested it and built mighty siege works against it. Present in the city was a poor wise man who might have saved it with his wisdom, but nobody thought of that poor man. So I observed, wisdom is better than valor, but the wisdom of the poor is scorned, and their words are not heeded. Words spoken softly by wise men are heeded sooner than those shouted by a lord in folly. Wisdom is more valuable than weapons of war, but a single error destroys much of value.
So the chapter ends with this kind of reflection about, or this parable, right? And the lesson being, if people don't have, if they don't pay attention to the wisdom that's there, then it doesn't really matter, right? If you don't listen, and again, this recognition that there are people that aren't very successful, they're not very powerful, and people don't pay attention to them. And so again, this parable, this story of a city where there was a guy there who would have helped them, but no one paid attention to the guy, is, kind of a lesson of what happens to us, not in a very simple way. We don't pay attention to the people who could teach us, and we oftentimes look at somebody's outer success and where they are in life, and we look at them and go, how can that person teach me anything? They've never accumulated anything. They've never been successful. And interestingly, of course, that's where you can learn a lot. Sometimes those people learned, and they're where they are because of their failures, and they never became successful, or they never were able to make it, or they have kind of to some extent, a tragic life because of the way they lived. And you should really pay attention to that. You should really learn from that. You should really make sure you don't do the same things to some extent. So the wisdom in some cases is like, it's obvious. You don't want to be like that. You don't want to have that happen. But even again, if it's not that situation, if it's one where the person just didn't get a lot of breaks, they knew what to do, but they just didn't, for whatever reason, and nothing ever lined up for them well. Maybe they were too nice. So I'm serious. I mean, I've met people like that. I'm like, how did this person never, how are they never successful? You see that in Hollywood all the time. You see people who are like, you scratch your head and you're like, man, either they made some other decisions that we don't know about, or they just got really unlucky. So yeah, we don't tend to listen to those people. And, yeah, it's not right, but that's what happens. So the parable, again, it's not necessarily the best parable. It's not the most powerful or memorable parable, but there's obviously an interesting lesson in it, which is there's wisdom around us. We just got to pay attention to it, and again, not negate it because the person doesn't, hasn't been successful. It's easy to do that. All right. It happens all the time, especially in the rabbinic world. I think about people, I've talked with rabbis before who, they didn't have a large congregation, right? They were not successful financially, or they didn't have, the trappings of success, but they're very smart and they had great lessons, and maybe they didn't care about that kind of stuff. But people tend not to pay attention to them because they never were the rabbi at a 3,000 member congregation, You think about it. Think about Rabbi Schimmel, Guy never had a congregation more than 100 people, but, he was very wise and didn't care, So people, there's all, yeah, he lived, it seemed like but he always seemed old. Yeah, he always seemed old, though, to me. He was a survivor, too. He was a survivor. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, he wasn't in the camps, but his family was.
Forgive my ignorance. Who is Rabbi Schimmel?
Wait, sorry, what?
Who is this that you're speaking?
Oh, you're talking about Mayor Schimmel, Rabbi Schimmel from North Hollywood, and Beth Mayer. Yeah. But again, there's people like that that were like from the old country that I remember that, they didn't have anything, but in some cases they didn't have anything because everything got taken from them. But yeah. Well, I definitely would take health, but it's not a question. I understand, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, my point was only that, like, do people pay attention to people like that, because they sit there. I watch that. I don't listen. I don't go to rabbinical conventions, but if I'm in an event, a dinner or something like that, and there's other rabbis there, and you think about the people who everyone goes up to and wants to talk to because they're successful or because they're connected. They have, nope. That's why I don't go. No, the funny thing is that, yeah, I never go. People ask like, why, well, and ask me all the time, why do you not go to these things? I go, there's nothing for me. Like I don't need to be in a situation where everyone's trying to outdo the next person. I hate that kind of stuff. Oh, they're the worst. I mean, Reverend Lynn will tell you. I mean, you get a bunch of people together, that's immediately what they start talking about. And it's depressing. It's really depressing to me. So I've always avoided that. And so it does, yes. So the irony is that I am, but I don't care because I don't want to be on TV, and I don't want anyone to pay attention to me. I mean, I want them to pay attention to what we're doing. I know it's good. I want to be ignored. I want to be ignored. I'm hoping to be ignored. I don't want to be. Yes, I just want to be left alone. No, I mean, I really don't. It makes me uncomfortable, and I really don't want to. I really don't want to be around it. So yeah, and again, I don't have to think about it. So yeah, I want to be. I want to work. I don't want to spend time in that kind of stuff. I hate it. So let's look at. This is a great line here. Yeah, there's going to be. This is the last couple of chapters are going to be some poems and some reflections and some lines from like Proverbs, but these lines tend to be a little bit more almost like, hey, and by the way, let me just share with you some other things instead of like longer pieces of 4 or 5 lines. In some cases, there's also a poem or two coming up. But let's look at this one. This is chapter 10.
Dead flies turn the perfumer's ointment fetid and putrid. So a little folly outweighs massive wisdom. A
Yeah.
sage's mind tends toward the right hand, a fool's toward the left. The mind of a fool is wanting also when traveling, which lets everybody know who is a fool.
So these are, again, these lines are not necessarily, sometimes they're connected or they build on the previous line, but a lot of these lines are just, I mean, they're little reflections on wisdom and on, how to behave and how to get through life.
If the wrath of the Lord flares up against you, don't give up your post. For when wrath abates, grave offenses are pardoned. Here is an evil I have seen under the sun, as great an error committed by a ruler. Folly was placed on lofty heights, while the rich sat in low estate. I have seen slaves on horseback and nobles walking on the ground like slaves.
Yeah. So, yeah, again, these are proverbs. These are not reflections, multi-line reflections like the previous chapters.
One who digs a pit will fall into it. One who breaches a stone fence will be bitten by a snake. One who quarries stones will be hurt by them. One who splits wood will be harmed by it. If the axe has become dull and the edge has not been whetted, then more strength must be exerted. Thus, the advantage of a skill depends on the exercise of prudence. If a snake bites because no spell was uttered, no advantage is gained by the trained charmer.
And that's an interesting reflection on snakes and charmers and the way people would be around snakes. But yeah, there's definitely some stuff here where this is not stuff that we're accustomed to. But then again, most of us are also not out chopping wood either. But again, you know, if you keep your axe sharp. Yeah. Snake, I know, is not, I know. There's different, yes, there's things that go back and forth between, you know, things that you and I come across. Though I, you know, like when you read a line like that, though, it's like you're suddenly taken into, like I am at least, you know, it's like I'm taken into the bazaar, the grand bazaar, and there's somebody, you know, playing a flute or talk, you know, looking at the snake, trying to, you know, like suddenly I'm in a, you know, Middle Eastern bazaar where there's snake charming. But yeah, there's something going on here where people, you know, it's at least common enough where people would say that and they would be, oh, I know what they're talking about. I know what they're, but yes, it's a juxtaposition of something that people do every day and then something that most of us don't do. But
I think it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
snake charmer in India.
What was that?
I saw a snake charmer in India. They still do it.
Yeah. But it's not something that yeah, most of us would come in contact with. But yeah, again, I guess if we were in the shuk, that we would see this kind of thing going on occasionally.
Sages' talk brings them favor, but fools' lips are their undoing. Their talk begins as silliness and ends as disastrous madness. Yet fools talk and talk. Humans cannot know what will happen. Who can tell them what the future holds?
Yeah. Now the previous couple lines are about talking and, you know, stupid talking and smart talking and silly talking. And then it hits us with this line that was in the previous chapters, which is, and we're all going to die. We don't know when, you know, who knows, but it's going to happen, right?
The exertions of fools tire them out, for they don't know how to get to a town. Alas for you, O land, whose king is a lackey and whose ministers dine in the morning. Happy are you, O land, whose king is a master and whose ministers dine at the proper time, with restraint, not with guzzling.
Yeah. And so again, there's this understanding that there's proper ways to eat and drink. It's not like you shouldn't drink, but you also shouldn't be a kind of a slob when you do it. You shouldn't be you shouldn't be a gluttonous person as you're doing this stuff. So again, what you know, how do we look at you know, the kinds of leaders and people that we have making the decisions? These are people who are acting responsibly, right? People who are engaged in not only thoughtful exercise of their power, but also in their personal behavior. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Through slothfulness, the ceiling sags. Through lazy hands, the house caves in. They make a banquet for revelry. Wine makes life merry, and money answers every need.
Yeah. So it seems that even while the book talks about having fun, there's a limit to it, right? And yeah, go around. Yeah, you're right. It definitely has that feeling, but it's definitely got to be controlled.
Don't revile a king, even among your intimates. Don't revile someone who is rich, even in your bedchamber. For a bird of the air may carry the utterance, and a winged creature may report the word.
Yeah, and we actually read this in our Wednesday night class. We talked about how Judah Hanasi in the Talmud has these great interchanges with Marcus Aurelius, and they're talking, but they have to make sure no one's around them because they quote the end of this chapter, right? They said they had to be careful because the walls have ears. A bird can bring back the word back to, somebody else. So you got to be very careful what you say because people can find out about it. And specifically, again, the context of this is specifically about speaking about people who are higher up than you, especially the rulers. So it says, even amongst people who are close to you, right? Don't talk bad about the king, right? So don't even talk to your spouse about it. So there's an understanding that, again, you got to be careful. So this is an interesting idea. It's one that, again, tells you that people were worried about the authorities. They were worried about being turned in. And anybody who lives in a society like this will tell you it's very exhausting. It's tiring. It's constantly oppressive to not be able to trust even the people in your house, your kids, your spouse. But I'm telling you, it's a serious issue. I mean, if you live in China today, there are people who literally, and again, it's not everybody who speaks out against the government is immediately arrested and rounded up, but they keep files, obviously, on everybody. They record constantly in China. Everything is monitored. I assume every phone conversation I have on my phone is being listened to by China. But there are consequences for it sometimes, and people wind up, getting arrested. They'll take them in, and it's exhausting for people. It's tough knowing that at any moment somebody could arrest you for something that you've said. So people generally don't talk. I mean, they don't. If you talk to somebody, even who's a friend in China, and you ask them about the government, they will not tell you. They will not, no matter how long you've known them for, no matter how close you are to them. Things that we say today in our daily life that we take for granted, that we talk about, whether we like the government or we don't like the government or we don't like this part of the government, we just say whatever we want. They won't do it. They really are afraid. So there are people, millions of people, billions of people who live in a world where they have to worry about what they say. We don't. Generally speaking, we don't worry about it. We don't. I mean, should we? I don't know. But we generally don't. Will we? I hope not. But we live in a world right now, most of us in our country, where we don't care about what we say. We're not worried about it. We don't think about it. I mean, maybe we should a little bit more in the sense that, we should think about the things that we say in a joking way that sometimes have consequences, but for the most part, you don't. So again, this line didn't really necessarily have anything to do with the previous line, other than, they were talking about kings, but this clearly was about, you, and don't, if you know that the king is an idiot, you don't talk about it even with your closest friends. This is a really famous line from the book as well. Oftentimes, I mean, people are a little confused by what it means, but if you read the context of it, I don't think it is. It's not very hard. These two lines kind of go together.
Send your bread forth upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, for you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth.
And of course, the famous translation of this is not send your bread forth. I mean, sometimes they try to translate it literally, but the King James, Mary says, yeah. And that phrase has come down to us as, again, one of the more famous lines from Ecclesiastes, cast thy bread upon the waters. It's often quoted in church. It's not as quoted necessarily in Judaism because, there are a lot of sayings that Jesus had about bread and things that were associated, to his ministry, where he talked about bread and created bread and all these connections to bread. But this is really understood. I mean, should be understood to be share what you have with other people, right? And if you look at the next line, and again, not all the lines go together, but these two lines go together. They are share what you have with other people. And what's interesting about it is that there's kind of a reward for it. Sometimes it's just, there isn't a reward, but this actually says there's a reward for it. And when it says after many days, you will get it, means that, gosh, sometimes it does come back to you. And some would say it comes back to us in the ways that we're going to be remembered. So when we cast our bread upon the waters, it goes everywhere. It can go everywhere. It can go out to everything. By doing that, it's not, it doesn't say cast your bread in front of you. Cast your bread on the waters. It's going to get taken by the waters all over the place. It's going to have a ripple effect. It's going to be spread as it goes out. And that's, it doesn't always say that there's going to be a reward for it. This actually does. It does. And sometimes, again, you find your own bread. You find your own bread that you cast out, right? It actually comes back to you sometimes. Sometimes you actually get it back. Look, should you always know that there's going to be a reward for what you do? Well, maybe not, but this says that there is. This says that, you'll get it back, actually. The next line, when it talks about distributing it, is more like you don't know. And that's what it says. You don't know. Lo toda. You don't know what's going to happen. And so you share because we're not always sure that you're going to have that is going to work out. And so by giving to others, you're protecting them and helping them. And because you don't know if it's going to, if you're going to need to do that. And sometimes by giving to somebody, you could also argue, it doesn't say it specifically, but maybe it's implied that if you give to somebody, that they may one day come back and help you with it, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're very successful right now. You may lose everything, but because you help somebody else out, you're going to get helped. So it could be also, kind of part of that. But it also could be you do it because you're going to help a lot of people and you don't know. You never know. Here you go. This is about looking at the world around us.
If the clouds are filled, they will pour down rain on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, the tree will stay where it falls. Whoever watches the wind will never sow, and whoever observes the clouds will never reap.
Yeah, this is definitely looking at looking at the world around us, looking at the natural world and making conclusions from it. And the interesting kind of takeaway from this is that sometimes you think too much, right?
It's kind of about, daydreaming or even planning and not acting.
Yeah. You don't know. But sometimes you look at the stuff, though. You look up at the wind and you go, no, I'm not going to sow now. Or again, the clouds are coming out. Maybe I'm not supposed to reap now. I mean, you can look at the weather and say, I'm not going to do this now. And there's people who do that,
Yeah.
Here we go.
Just as you do not know how the life breath passes into the limbs within the womb of the pregnant woman, so you cannot foresee the actions of God, who causes all things to happen.
Yeah, let's just look at that one before we go to the next one, because this this line here is kind of wild. Now, of course, we can do ultrasounds on people today, and we can do imaging, and we can see a fetus now. We know a lot of stuff that's happening, but they recognize that as a real miracle, right? As life breath passes into them, the derech ruach, the way that energy is going into the limbs. We don't. It's almost like that's the way your life is unfolding. Your life is unfolding after you're born, in a similar way. We don't understand how it happens. We don't understand how that stuff happens. It's a weird it's a weird analogy, right? It's a weird image, but it's pretty powerful. So when you're in the womb, these things happen. We don't understand them. And then when you're out of the womb, we don't know what's happening. It's also a miracle.
How sweet. Oh, sow your seed in the morning and don't hold back your hand in the evening, since you don't know which is going to succeed, the one or the other, or if both are equally good. How sweet is the light. What a delight for the eyes to behold the sun. Even someone who lives many years should rejoice during all of them, remembering how many the days of darkness are going to be. The only future is nothingness.
So
That's not very comforting.
no, no. So it means, again,
How am I
even
supposed to
people,
rejoice if I'm thinking about that?
even people who are old,
You were old. You're not old, I'm old.
Even people who are old, I didn't say you, even people who are old should be enjoying it, because, again, when you think about what's coming, it's not good. Well, again, it's not really, that's not necessarily the only way to translate that, I will say. But there is definitely a feeling like the next existence is also, what's the translation, Mary? Could not let go of it. So again, this translation will not use vanity unless it's a footnote. They don't like the word vanity, which again, it makes sense because we don't use the word vanity now we don't use it that way. We think of vanity as being somebody who's being vain, but there's definitely a feeling like that's also transitory. All the stuff that's coming in the future is also Hevel. That's weird because we'd think, oh no, that's when the things really count, is in the next world. It's not what it says. It says the next world is Hevel too, because what's coming is air. Yeah. Ooh, I don't like that one. Smoke is something. This is air. What's coming is Hevel, breath, air. It's not smoke. Hevel is never smoke. I don't know why they would use smoke. That's not a good one. I would definitely use air or nothing or fleeting. But fleeting doesn't work here because how is the world to come fleeting? But it's saying the world to come is ephemeral or ethereal. I like ethereal because ethereal has ether as its root, which I think this is a better translation for a Hevel is ether. It's all ether. So now when you think of ether, you think of that gas.
Yeah,
Um,
we don't use ether that much either now to mean,
I know,
except in
but it
ether.
is the
Right,
origin. I mean,
it's
it's the
a-
root for the word ethereal.
an obsolete theory of what the world was made out of.
Yeah, I, I do like the idea that It's not necessarily, I don't like the idea that I mean, nothing it's not nothingness, which is kind of the way it's sometimes translated is, and it's translated here. The future is nothingness. I don't like that translation either. It's also, it's, think about it this way. It's also ungraspable. It can't be grasped. It's not, you can't hold on to it. So if you translated it that way, that everything that's coming is not something you can grasp onto. It's not something that you can hold. It's not tangible. It's intangible. You can also translate it that way. Because remember, I told you this is the name for Abel. Abel in the Bible is Hevel. That's his name. His name is Hevel. Hevel doesn't mean nothing. His life wasn't nothing. Abel's life was short. It was here and then gone. There's definitely something there to that. Now, again, if the world to come is also nothing to grasp onto, that's not hopeful for sure, but it's not that it's nothing. So I don't like that. It's the word nothing cannot be the translation. Smoke is also, I mean, they're trying to convey the idea that it's not that there's nothing you can grasp, but not intangible. Ungraspable is a better translation. By the way, I like that translation, or incapable of I mean, you can't translate as intangible. I think I would like that word better, because if the world to come it's not tangible for us. The world to come is not tangible for us. It's not something we can hold on to. It's not something we can grasp on. I'm okay with that. Right? The future is nothingness is definitely not the way that tradition wants. Look, it's not the way the rest of the Bible even conveys it. All right. Look at this line.
Oh, youth, enjoy yourself while you are young. Let your heart lead you to enjoyment in the days of your youth. Follow the desires of your heart and the glances of your eyes. But know well that God will call you to account for all such things, and banish care from your mind, and pluck sorrow out of your flesh. For youth and black hair are fleeting.
There's the word again. It's Hevel. Black hair and youth are Hevel. They're here and they're gone. They're here and they're gone. Again, to some extent, that's weird to think that that's what the future is. The future being there and gone is, if that's the same word as what's going to happen to you, and it's what it says, Kol Sheba Hevel, that if that's fleeting, then how could the end of our existence be fleeting? It doesn't really seem to be. Well, yeah. No, but in the future, in the world to come, that's even more amazing, is that that maybe is what the Bible is telling us. That again, because it's not graspable, or at least because the things that we think of are not going to matter in the next world, it's a waste of time. I'm okay. I mean, I believe that. I think that is true. I mean, I believe that in my belief, whatever happens in the next world, that this world is not the things that I'm worried about here are not things I have to worry about in the next world. I believe that. It just doesn't make sense that like the next world is another version of this world. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. And so that's why, like versions of heaven or hell that are just versions of this world, but a better or worse version, don't really make sense. So, I mean, Ecclesiastes, I believe, is saying that, but in a way that it's profoundly can be depressing for people if there's nothing. But I don't believe there's no. I mean, they're not saying that there's nothing. They're saying that there's Sheol. They're saying that there is something. It's just look, I've told you before, it's in Psalms too. Lo hametim hallelujah, that the dead don't praise God. Now, people got upset with that because they're like, well, wait, I thought in heaven we're all surrounded by God and we're like angels, we're surrounding God and we're praising God all the time. Why would the book of Psalms say that the dead don't praise God? And it could be, again, because the person who wrote that psalm did not believe that in the next world that was required of people in the next world. Again, if you're part of God at that point, why would you be praising God at that point? You're part of God. I mean, however you want to understand it, it is possible that in the next existence that we have, that we don't have those cares, that we're not part of that. And again, why are we worried about it?
But isn't that why we say Kaddish? Because the dead can't praise God, so we do it for the
Yes, that's part of the logic behind it, is that they can't do it, that the dead are no longer praying. Yes, we elevate their spirit by doing it because they can't do it anymore. Now, again, you can make the argument, do they need to do it? But if that's tied again, Judith, to this idea that our relatives who are not perfect people, which they weren't, they need us to help raise them up, right? And so in the year after they die, whatever purgatory they're in, we're raising them up by saying Kaddish for them. I mean, that's the lot. I mean, I didn't say I believe that. I say that's the logic behind it. Actually, you raised the issue, Judith, and that's why we do it. Yes. We do it because we believe that the people in the next world can't, and that by us doing it, we help preserve them in their whenever purgatory they're in that moment. We don't have to do it after a year though. Once they're done, we don't need it anymore. They're free. They're free of whatever purgatory is. We also believe that to some extent that purgatory is to get us free of our existence in this world, right? So this world's garbage is so attached to us that it takes up to a year, depending on how messed up we are, to get that off of us. So that's what we do in purgatory, is we get rid of the attachments that we had to wealth or to fame or to whatever problems we had in this world, that we get rid of them. The better we are in this world, the less we have to do in the next world of losing those attachments. That's the logic behind it, Judith. Judith is now a death doula, helping people get free, right? So maybe we can do that. All right, the last chapter, my friends. The summer. let's give the final parting words. These next 10 verses or so, and then we'll get to it. All right, here we go. And because this chapter break was stupid, because this line goes definitely with the previous line.
So appreciate your vigor in the days of your youth, before those days of sorrow come, and those years arrive of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. Before sun and light and moon and stars grow dark, and the clouds come back again after the rain. When the guards of the house become shaky, and the soldiers are bent, and the maids that grind, grown few, are idle, and the ladies that peer through the windows grow dim, and the doors to the street are shut, with the noise of the handmill growing fainter, and the song of the bird growing feebler, and all the strains of music dying down. When one is afraid of heights, and there is terror on the road, for the almond tree may blossom, the grasshopper be burdened, and the caper bush may bud again. But mortals set out for their eternal abode, with mourners all around in the street.
Now you can see, wait, all these lines obviously go together. This is a poem. This is a reflection, an end of the life reflection. All of this so far. We're not done with it. But again, it kind of like, you know, you can make the argument that this part starts here, Oh, youth, enjoy yourself while you're young. Because, again, appreciate your vigor in the days of your youth. You know, that you get to a point in life where you're not enjoying it anymore. And again, this is, you know, I don't know what to say other than there are people who get to this stage of life where they're not enjoying it anymore. And they're not taking in the world around them as something that they enjoy. We're not done.
Before the silver cord snaps and the golden bowl crashes, the jar is shattered at the spring, and the jug is smashed at the cistern. And the dust returns to the ground as it was, and the life breath returns to God who bestowed it.
And that seems to be, again, the way Ecclesiastes describes death. Right? The silver cord snaps, the golden bowl crashes, and the jar is shattered at the spring, and the dust returns to the ground, and life, breath, the ruach, goes back to God that gave it. That energy is now back with God. So the life force that was within you doesn't go away. It's back with God. Do you have consciousness anymore? Do you have understanding? Do you have ego? Is that there? Maybe not. And then here's the line, my friends.
Utter futility, said Kohelet. All is futile.
So if you think that this wasn't written by the same author, it just came back to the beginning, right? Havel Havelim, Hakol Havel. That's what Kohelet said. It said right at the beginning. It's all futile. Now, that's probably the last word. Let's read the end. But that's probably the last word of the book, which was, again, just to go back to Ecclesiastes, the beginning. Let's just go back to the beginning. There's a line. These are the words of Kohelet, son of King David. And then it begins, Havel Havelim, Amar Kohelet, Havel Havelim Hakol. The book just ended with the same line it began with. This is not part of the book. It's the introduction. It's the prologue, if you will. The book just ended the same way it began. What a way to end. Not just the fact you're ending with the same words that you began with. Right? But then it's all futile. It's all Havel. It's all air, including everything I just told you. Now that's a powerful way to end the book. It's all ungraspable. It's all intangible. It's all undecipherable. It's all air. And then somebody went ahead and did this to the book. Somebody did this to the book. The editors, we don't know how long it took because we have no copy of it without this. So I want to make it clear. If we found a copy of the book without this on there, we would go, okay, we knew it all along. But it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear that the guy somebody added this because it goes to the third person, right? Here you go.
A further word. Because Kohelet was a sage, he continued to instruct the people. He listened to and tested the soundness of many maxims. Kohelet sought to discover useful sayings and recorded genuinely truthful sayings. The sayings of the wise are like goads, like nails fixed in prodding sticks. They were given by one shepherd. A further word. Against them, my son, be warned. The making of many books is without limit, and much study is a wearying of the flesh.
Now that sounds like something that Kohelet would have said, right? That sounds like something he would have said, which is, you just stop talking about it so much, just live it, right? Seems like something Kohelet would have said. Okay, so what? Well, let's talk about that because that's not the last word. This is the worst part. That first part of the epilogue is, well, and this is like everything here. Okay, and the guy lived a lot. So most likely this was the first editor. The first editor who was trying to be true to the guy added this. It's an explanation. It's not necessary, but it's a nice bow at the end. Not necessary. Could have ended the way it ended, and we'd all be happy. At least it's consistent. This could be considered one of the most egregious affronts in literature.
The sum of the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe the commandments, for this applies to all humankind, that God will call every creature to account for everything unknown, be it good or bad.
So the book just said, we don't understand why this stuff happens. We don't know. The race is not to, you just read it. The race is not to the swift. We don't know why. The editor here just said, but God makes everything right. Now, clearly, people had problems with this book. We know the rabbis had problems with this book. We said that. The rabbis were more uncomfortable with this book than they were with Song of Songs, which is erotic poetry. They had more problems with this because of the philosophy, because of the consequences of this, because people would read this and go, why am I bothering? Why am I offering a sacrifice? There is nothing in this book that would make anyone walk out and go, I better go make my sacrifice. And so finally, when we read the book in the final version that we have, somebody, some priest, some editor who wanted you to make sure you were following all the rules just told you, do all the commandments. Shomer mitzvot. It's like some Orthodox rabbi just took the book and just added to the end of the book that was a powerfully insightful and really, really tough, journey that somebody just took us on, and then said, and by the way, God will fix everything.
And why did the
Do the
editor
right thing because God wants you to do the right thing, and God will fix it at the end. That's not what the book said. Now, again, are there people who believe that? Could it happen? Could everything he have said it? And could it happen? Yes. Could it be that God does fix everything at the end? That God, when you get to heaven, all the accounts are made right. It's possible, but not in this world. And that's not what the guy said. So somebody read it, wanted you to look, it's the director's cut that ends with utter futility. That's the way that's the way the writer wanted you to end it. It didn't test well, right? The people who came to see the movie didn't like the guy dying at the end. So they cut that part out. It happens. People don't like an ending to the movie, and so they write a new ending.
Great
This ending
expectations.
is the acceptable ending. This is the ending that the crowd wants, which is, and God fixes everything. Because if people read this and didn't have this ending, they'd walk out and go, so it doesn't really matter. Now, that's not what he said, but there are people who would take that as the lesson. And the editor, we sometimes call him the pious editor. The pious editor who did this wanted you not to do that. Now, for you and me and everyone who's on here right now, I will tell you, I'm 99% certain that Kohelet did not write that ending. You know how I know? Because the person who just gave us the first editorial ending has told us the book is over. And now they put something at the end, to the end. This is the postscript to the postscript. This is the silly thing that comes at the end of the credits. But literally, it would be funny if I wasn't mad. I'm mad for Ecclesiastes. I'm mad for Kohelet that somebody did this to his book, because again, it's not like he would read this and go, that's not true. Maybe he would. I don't know, by the way. Maybe he would. But it's possible he'd say, okay, fine. I understand. You made my book more palatable to everybody else. But that's not what his point was. And he didn't say that. He could have said at the end, he could have said anywhere in the book, and it's important to revere God and observe the commandments. By the way, notice that at least in this translation, when we look at the end, that we add the line again from before. Because this line is so strange that they didn't even want to end with that line, because even that line could be seen as, I'm not really so sure, because it ends with the words tov ve'imra. And the traditional rabbi, the traditional answer was, let's not end on a bad note. Let's not end with the word ra. Let's not end with the word evil or bad. And again, so it ends with the words revere God. Revere God. So traditionally, when people read this book of Ecclesiastes, they finish with this line 13, sof davar, which is the most religious way of ending it, which is keep the commandments, and everybody has to do that. Kol zeh kol adam. That's for everybody. That's for kizeh kol. This is for everybody has to do this. Really? The guy didn't say one time about keeping commandments. Not one time did he talk about making sacrifices. Not one time did he say about keeping holidays. Not one time. Never. Never. Nobody opens this book except for the holiday of Sukkot. Thank God the rabbis at least instituted a reading of this during Sukkot. I am too, Reverend Lynn. I am too. I am sometimes scratch my head and say, how did this? And so you have to ask yourself that question. How did this book get into the Bible? How did this book make it? Who did that? The rabbis didn't know. I told you, they thought Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, had more of a place in the Bible than this book, because this undermines the whole concept that if you do good things and if you make sacrifices when we tell you to, that things are going to be good for you. And Ecclesiastes just shot that down. So let's say this was the common theory is that this made it into the Bible around 200 BCE. So this is before things got real bad under the Romans. Things were not necessarily, great, but it's not a bad time in Jewish history. This book then is written, which, by the way, when people try to understand the Bible, and I get so mad at people because they're like, oh, it was written by God and Moses wrote it. And like, really? Because for a fact, I don't care how pious you are, how religious, that this Bible was written over 1,000-year period of time. 1,000 years from the earliest times of the Bible to the times that, like the book of Daniel or this book. It's 1,000 years of time. You don't even care. So if you're a fundamentalist, you say that the Bible, that the first 5 books are written by Moses, about 1,200. But you still know that the book of Daniel, or you'd say even the most pious knows that the events of Moses, 1,200, and the events of, let's say, Esther are 300 BCE. That's still 900 years. So even the most pious scholar will tell you it's written over 900 years. It takes place over 9. Okay, well, true. God knows it, and the stories were all bound to happen. But it's still written over a period of 900 years. The Christian Bible was written over a period of maybe 70 years. Do you understand? The Christian Bible existed to some extent, as it does, 70 years from the time the first person sat down and wrote something to the time the last person sat down and wrote something. There's 70, 80, maybe 70 years. I don't even know if it was. Let's say it's 70 years. It exists. The Bible, that book was written by people who have the same issues. You understand? They have the same mentality. Okay, things are a little different after Jesus was gone for 50 years. I know, I get it, okay? It's not exactly the same, but take 60, 70 years versus 800 years, 900 years, You have such a different mentality. You have somebody who comes forward and says this, and somebody who's, and they're not even talking about the same reality. Can you imagine somebody talking about something that happened 800 years ago, and I'm talking to you and I'm engaged in the same dialogue? That's what the Bible is. It's the same dialogue, and it's the same book. So you're telling me a book that's written over 800 years makes the same sense as a book that's written 70 years, or the Quran that was written within 30 years, 20 years of the first story to the last story? So you can't compare it. And so when people talk about the Bible and say, why is this book there? Because somebody wrote this at a certain period of time and they got away with it. That's not the, I don't want to be that exaggerated. I won't say they got away with it. They wrote it. People loved it. People clearly accepted it. And other people were like, but how does this relate to the previous stuff that you had? And yet they let it in. And I think that that's a tremendous statement about inclusion of ideas that are contradictory. Rabbinic Judaism, and some people, I just talked with a person going through conversion. She's going through conversion next month. She happens to be a wonderful young woman. She's also in the military. She actually works for CENTCOM. That's her job. I mean, like she works for, like she says, the thing I said, the rabbis are going to ask you, what's your biggest difficulty with Judaism? And she says, my biggest problem is the arguments that go on in Judaism, the arguments, the lack of clarity, the lack of direction. And this is a woman in the military. I get it. I said, I totally understand where you're coming from. I said, you want to know what the order is. You want to know what you're supposed to do. The Bible doesn't do that. Judaism doesn't do that. And she says, that's the hardest, that's the thing that I struggle with the most. I said, look, it's very honest, very happy you said that, because you can say that. And you can say that to them, and of course they're going to appreciate that. They're going to know you take it seriously. But it is a challenge. It is something that people have a problem with Judaism. They say, how can this be here? How can the book of Ecclesiastes be here and the book of Deuteronomy be here? How can they both be here? Because they're 900 years of stuff. I mean, give me 900 years. You can't compare. That's why it's not fair. It's not even a fair comparison. When people say, yeah, but the Christian Bible seems more unified. Of course it does, because it's written by people who are literally almost in the same experience. They're having the same experiences. These people didn't have the same experiences, and their books are different. And again, look, everybody knows that time moves much faster today. So when you see somebody who wrote something 100 years ago, you say how quaint it is, how different time it was. But I don't even know that 100 years, 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, 100 years was like 10. For us.
Mark, you have said many
Wait,
times.
hold 1 second, Mike. Yeah. Keep going. Well, yes. So Mike's saying when it was actually written. Look, but some of it was written hundreds of years before. Some pieces of it were written. But yes, you're right. So editing it, let's say it's edited around 500. But parts of it were 500 years earlier, 400 years earlier, right? Parts of it were probably written in the 800s, right? So parts of it are the words, the feelings, right? The mind is coming from someone who lived in the 9th century. And then there's somebody else who's writing in the 2nd century. They're going to have different perspectives. And again, even back then when time moved very slow, that's still a lot of time. And it's not only different time, it's different experiences. When you're living under exile, you're going to have one experience. If you're living in a nice, calm, manner of, I'm a farmer, my father was a farmer, his father was a farmer, and we've always been on the land. That's a much different, that's why I say, the farmers who lived in Israel, in ancient Israel, and they lived 200 years without having any problems. That's like the guy who's a farmer, in Kansas, who inherited the farm and then it's like the guy who got off the boat from the old country, who lives in the Lower East Side, and then his kids move out to the suburbs, and then their kids move somewhere else, and then they're never in one place for very long. How do you compare the two experiences? Those people have completely different realities. They have completely different ways of looking at the world. You can't compare them. They might as well live on different planets. The interesting thing, of course, is that they all maybe live in this country, but the experiences that people have, the realities that they live in, they're going to create completely different expressions, and people don't get that. They miss that or they want to see that this Bible is a unified work. I'm like, why are you doing that to yourself? You're literally forcing the beauty of this out. And again, the person who threw this at the end of it just said, hey, we got it. We're going to include this in the Bible. We better put a stamp on it to make it so that we can get away with it. So I will say, I don't like the end. I don't like the fact that the person did that. But if they needed to do that in order to get it into the book, so be it.
You've Mark.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, sorry. Yes. The happy ending here is ridiculous on this book. It's totally ridiculous. And it's absurd. Yeah, sorry. Was it Judith?
Yes. So you've said many times over the years that the Torah and the Tanakh, the Bible, is true, right?
Yeah.
So it's full of truths. So whoever edited this brought it in because it's a truth, even though it's perhaps contradictory to the rest. I mean, it's the editor making sure that the whole picture is painted.
Yeah. And if the editor, though, had to put that in at the end to get it in, I'm okay with it. If they had to they had to fit it in by throwing in that silly ending to it, I don't mind. But let's just say that's the way that they were able to fit it into the Bible.
Yeah.
That was the envelope that they were able to put it in so they could get it into our Bible, because, the people who are simple-minded would have said, oh, that doesn't belong here. So let's put an end to it. Fine. We'll put this little end to it because again, I don't want to say that it's contradictory to everything that came before it. It's not contradictory, but it's an oversimplification. At the very least, it's an oversimplification. And again, you don't have to come away with that understanding. The guy never said anything about keeping kosher. He never said anything about keeping the holidays. He never said anything about keeping a sacrifice. So the fact that you've now said that you have to keep the commandments at the end of this is not, that wasn't there. Yeah. But we know that that's your agenda. We know that your Bible was there so that we would keep the commandments. I get it. But that's not what you did. You took a beautiful book that had nothing to do with that, and you now made it accessible because you put in a line that would fit the rest of your theology. I wonder how we do that today, by the way. I wonder how we make things palatable. Yeah, yeah. Now we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated in the fact that we don't have to have that kind of stuff necessarily, but even for the most avant-garde and the most difficult, ways of blowing people's minds, we still have to have a Hollywood ending. I mean, there still has to be a palatable ending where most people will actually watch it. So, yeah, when we finish a book, we say, Tam v'neshalem tehele ol el borei olam. That we give thanks to God, the creator of everything. And that's kind of the way the Bible always kind of ends a book, by our tradition of saying we praise God, the creator of everything. But again, for 99% of the book, we were sitting with a guy who's telling us life isn't always fair. And it doesn't matter how many sacrifices you make. Sometimes bad people are going to win. And then we just read the ending, which, like, why did you do that to us? But 99% of it wasn't that. So next week, the next section of the Bible, as we go through, and as I told you before, the organization of the scrolls. It starts with Song of Songs, then Ruth, the Lamentations, then Ecclesiastes, then Esther. So these four we've already read. That's Passover, Shavuot, Tisha B'Av, Sukkot, and then Purim. So Purim and Passover is the beginning of the year biblically, and Esther is the end of the year biblically. And so those, that's the first of the five, and then that's last of the five. Esther is the only one of these five that is really a long story. It's like Ruth in the sense that it's a story, and it's a narrative. And so you have 4 chapters here, and you can see the book of Esther is 10 chapters, so it's twice as long as Ruth. So we'll probably be reading it over a couple of weeks. We'll probably be reading Esther over a couple of weeks. But I will tell you this, for those of you who have not read the book of Esther before, it is not what you think it is. So when I tell you that all the books of as Judith put on, there's a truth in everything, there's a tremendous truth in the book of Esther. Some would say it's one of the greatest truths. The problem is, it's completely not factual. It's the only book of the Bible that we can say almost without doubt there's not one truthful piece of it other than there was a guy named Achashverosh. Other than that, of course. And some would say, I would say that some of the most mind-numbing truth in the world, and definitely Jewish existence, is in the book of Esther. Because Esther really speaks to the diaspora experience for the last 2,000 years, which is, you know how precarious our existence is? It depends on one guy. It depends on one king. It depends on one vizier. And it also depends on one person, a man or a woman in the right place at the right time, who gets things done. And how much more true can that be? Because we've seen it happen so many times. Whether it's, whether it's Jacobson, that was Harry Truman's friend. Whether it's, that happens to be the right person at the right place at the right time, in the king's court that was able to, stop a Raoul Wallenberg who happened to be, in Hungary at the right place, at the right time to get out thousands of Jews out of Budapest at the last minute. There's sometimes people who rise to the occasion who are able to be in the right place at the right time. But it's a very, very strange story. It's a very sexual story. Very sexual story. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, this is in the Bible? Because this is some pretty graphic stuff. And so it's a very strange story, in the sense that, again, it's not factual, but it's based on the Persian court. It's based on real kinds of things that happen in the Persian court. And it's also, again, one of the most truthful stories, even though it's the least factual. It's a very interesting story. So we'll be reading it over the next couple of weeks. And in the month of June, we'll be reading the story of Esther, getting us ready for the next time we read it, when we don't really read it at our temple, but we also don't skip over it. We make light of the story of Purim, of Esther, by retelling it in a humorous and hopefully insightful way with music. And so that's the way we've been doing it for many years. All right, everybody. Thank you, Rosemary, for taking us through Ecclesiastes. Again, I hope we make the most of each day, and I hope at least today you have good enough health that you're not like the description in the book of Ecclesiastes of somebody who's no longer has the strength or the wherewithal to enjoy this day. So take care, everybody, and thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Thanks.